Has this ratcheting up of tensions with respect to, the tit-for-tat expulsion of journalists come as a surprise to you, given that we know the narrative around China's handling of the coronavirus outbreak is incredibly sensitive?
No, absolutely. It's not a surprise, not just to me. I spent, 15 years at Hong Kong, at the University of Hong Kong, others who are on the ground there. But what it does represent is it is a ratcheting up, but it's a ratcheting up on efforts on the part of China to control the global narrative, which we've been seeing quite a lot about what the foreign media and others can say or convey about what China is doing, not just in COVID-19, but a lot of other sensitive issues as well.
And of course, this is kind of, front and center in terms of we've seen a very rapid move in the Chinese state media narrative to move towards, the great success of how China has handled the coronavirus outbreak, notwithstanding the cover-up at the beginning and the criticism and just the sheer number of deaths, right? But I am wondering, this kind of idea that it's the American fake news that's contributed to a lot of the kind of social unrest that you've seen in China as a response. How powerful is that rhetoric? And if so, does that then mean that we should assume that other foreign independent journalists will be expelled as well?
Well, I think so, and I think that's what the fear and concern is. I think it's not so much, if you talk to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they feel they're doing accurate reporting on the ground, and that it's very important for the rest of the world to see what is happening, and not just from official sources, but from foreign media as well. But the situation has been deteriorating for some time, so this is not new. Any time that they've been reporting about sensitive issues, so now it's COVID-19. But you remember for months when we had the pro-democracy protest in Hong Kong, there was a lot of concern about how foreign media was covering that and whether the NBA was saying anything in support of that, but also with the coverage of the mass detention of the Muslim minority, the Uyghurs and others in mass detention camps in Northwest China. So there is a concern that looks at a whole variety of issues and not just this current one that's on the plate right now.
Doreen, you mentioned that China now wants to control the global narrative. Frankly, doesn't seem like there's much we can do. What can we do to help solve that problem?
Well, I think just more support for journalists, and certainly it would help if more foreign leaders spoke about it. So there was a different situation in 2012 and 2013 when, again, the weaponization of visas. So you need a visa to operate in China. Usually it's a one-year one, but what's been happening is shorter-term visas, 6 months. 1 month even. And so this idea that if there is content or coverage that you're doing that is not acceptable to China, that you could be expelled. And in fact, over the last 8 to 10 years, there have been, at least 9 journalists who have been expelled and so on. But the situation had gotten quite bad in 2012, 2013, that Vice President Biden at that time went to China, spoke both publicly and privately to Chinese officials, including then brand new President Xi Jinping, to express grave concerns and grave doubts about how U.S. journalists were being treated there. And in fact, just a couple of weeks after that particular talk and visit to Beijing, visas suddenly were now made available for New York Times journalists and even Bloomberg journalists as well.
And what, in your opinion, are both the short and now the long-term impacts of this?
Okay, well, the short term is quite clear. Are there going to be more expulsions? What's going to be happening? China has hinted at that. And as I just said, that a number of journalists have these shorter term visas. And so the journalists who were expelled this time, they had visas that ended by December 31st of this year. So will they expel some more? And the second short term is what's going to be happening in Hong Kong, because something very unusual what China did was to say not only are these journalists to be expelled out of Beijing, out of China, but they were also not allowed to work in Hong Kong or Macau, which are the special administrative regions of China. And that's a first, because oftentimes in the past, when they've been expelled, they would go to Hong Kong. And so now the Foreign Correspondent Club in Hong Kong are demanding some clarification from Chief Executive Carrie Lam and say, what's the deal? How, is this a further erosion of, one country, two systems that's already being experienced in Hong Kong? The long-term effects, I think you'll have to kind of see where it escalates. You just talked about the Olympics in Japan that are coming this year. Well, Beijing has the 2022 Winter Olympics. Will things get better by then? We certainly saw in the 2008 Summer Olympics that Beijing had in the period leading up to that, things got much better for foreign journalists. But maybe the situation has changed so much that there won't be that kind of leeway.